Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for March 14th, 2022. Can we have the roll, please?
Greg Strike.
Here.
Andre Spinelli.
Here.
Jared Gardner.
Here.
Radhika Krishna. Here. Jim Winchester.
Here.
Scott Pullis.
Here.
Jeff Ron.
Here.
Brandy Eber.
Here.
You have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, no minutes to go through, so we'll just move on to disclosures. Commissioner Eber.
None to disclose.
Commissioner Winchester.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Strike.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Krishna.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Spinelli.
Nothing.
Commissioner Ron.
No disclosures.
And Commissioner Pullis.
No disclosures.
And no disclosures for myself. I guess moving on, next item on the agenda is our first case on the regular agenda. This is 2022-0023. Can we get a report?
Yes, you may, Chair Gardner. All Municipality of Anchorage transportation projects are required to follow a strategy for developing context-sensitive transportation projects. There's 3 steps in that process. The first 2 steps are the concept report and the design study report. Those 2 go before the Planning and Zoning Commission. The concept report for the Seward Highway 36th Avenue Interchange project went before the Planning and Zoning Commission as an informational item earlier this year. Tonight, the Commission has the design study report, abbreviated as the DSR. The primary decision of the Commission for the DSR is for alternative development, evaluation and screening criteria, and alternative decision. There are 13 topic areas in Title 21 that guide the Commission's review of the DSR. Those include existing conditions, design standards, alternatives, compliance with Title 21, long and short-term impacts for land use and right-of-way acquisition, utility and infrastructure impacts, street illumination, maintenance, environmental constraints, non-motorized access, public involvement, and cost. The Commission's review shall include, but not be limited to, these 13 topic areas. I'll briefly describe public comments we received for this case, the project alternatives, and review the department's recommendation. Agencies and departments commented to request a SWIP be provided and to note that official street names have a directional label. The Rogers Park Community Council provided comments both before and after the staff report was written. Rogers Park requested additional considerations and conditions. Their comments have been provided as an item laid on the table, at least the ones that we received after the staff report was finalized. Rogers Park had some comments that were in the initial staff packet because we got them before it was finalized. The DSR describes a high severity crash rate and an elevated collision rate, as well as a lack of pedestrian and bicycle facilities in the project area. Existing zoning is generally B3 on the west side of the Seward Highway, and B3 as well as residential on the east side of the highway. B3 is general business district. Both sides of the Seward Highway are shown as city center north of 36th Avenue on the land use map. The land use map shows future land uses for the municipality. The land use map shows existing residential land uses remaining into the future where they currently exist. Since areas east of the project or east of the Seward Highway within the project area are expected to remain residential into the future, the project should mitigate noise or other anticipated potential impacts to those neighborhoods. City centers are described in the land use plan as being pedestrian friendly with wider sidewalks, a distinct streetscape themes and features, as well as mixed use developments. The project should also be consistent with that city center land use designation as it moves forward. Alternatives for the project include a no-build, medium U-turn, and 3 iterations of a loop ramp interchange. The preferred alternative identified in the DSR is loop ramp alternative 1, which would elevate the Seward Highway over 36th Avenue at grade and add frontage roads adjacent to the Seward Highway that would have multi-use pathways and bicycle lanes. Alternative 1 is the preferred alternative because it negates the need to excavate in the water table and the creation of a segment of the Seward Highway that would need to be continuously dewatered. The department recommends approval of the loop ramp interchange alternative 1, which is the preferred alternative identified in the context-sensitive solutions design study report for the Seward Highway 36th Avenue Interchange project, subject to 3 conditions of approval, which are the alternative must be in substantial compliance with plans on file. The project submits a plans in hand for review by the Urban Design Commission to complete the 3rd phase of municipal review, and a SWIP be provided prior to construction. There are also 2 recommended advisory comments or considerations. They are to ensure clarity with the directional component of the official street names and documents, and to incorporate design aspects consistent with the city center land use designation in much of the project area. Members of the petitioner's project team are in attendance tonight and are available for questions, as am I. Thank you. That's the end of my staff report.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you through the chair. Ms. Appleby, thank you for the succinct review of your summary packet, and thanks for the efforts that you put forward in pulling it together and presenting it here tonight. I do have a host of questions. I'll try and make them as clear as I can as I work through them, and of course let other commissioners jump in as well. First one is around the first time we heard this. I think it was back in January 10th, case 2022-0011. Came before the commission as an informational item. For the record, can you tell me when this DSR summary report was actually submitted?
I'd have to check in the packet application.
Just looking at the headers, I see December 2021. So if that's accurate, then this DSR document that we're now looking at was submitted, finalized and submitted before we heard step 1. Is that accurate?
So if I look in the records in the files, so the final submission was January 6th. Hang on, and then...
And I can ask the applicant as well if it would be more appropriate.
I think he's making the point that they produced the document before we received their concept informational items. And maybe that's what he's trying to say.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just trying to find, I know in the staff report I wrote the dates. So we received the final application January 6th. I know it was in January when we had the informational item. I was trying to see what date in January, so it was potentially the final submission before the informational item, or it was close to that date, because I know it was in January.
Thank you, Ms. Appleby. The point I'm trying to make, and I'll do so with another reference to the staff packet, is our opportunity to ask questions and have discussion and comment on that CSS report. And the lack of ability for that process to be rolled into this DSR study report. So on page 15 of the staff packet, item 9 says response to comments from concept report review. Would that PCC hearing in January qualify as the concept report review, or is that referring to something else? Because if it's the PCC hearing, we heard the concept report, we got to review it and comment on it, and those comments weren't incorporated into this DSR study report, and I'm concerned that that box is checked and perhaps shouldn't be.
Sorry, I'm not sure where you're referencing. So I know in the staff report here it is. So there was January 10th was when this was a concept report for the Planning and Zoning Commission. It was an informational item at that point. I did rewatch it before writing this staff report, but it was an informational item, and I feel that this staff report addresses the minimum requirements in Title 21 for there to be an informational concept report and then a draft design study report that is not a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission where there's still a decision.
Okay, I will then perhaps repeat the questions I had at the January 10th hearing if they weren't incorporated into this report then. If I can ask one or two more follow-up questions. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Ron.
All right, thanks. So you mentioned the code elements by which the commission is supposed to review this plan, and also that there's an enabling clause that if the commission decides to open this up for public hearing, that is an option that we can do. Can you talk us through that, what that might look like, and if we were to move in that direction, would the department be prepared to give us a date upon which this could come back before us?
Yes, Title 21 says that the DSR goes before the Planning and Zoning Commission, but I did note, as you just stated, that you would make a motion to open it up for a public hearing. We would schedule it for the next available date. It would have to be a time for us to give sufficient notice if it's a public hearing, so I'm guessing it would be a month, at least a month out. I'd have to look at the calendar, but yes, that's correct. We would schedule it at the next available date based on public notice requirements if the commission motioned and approved to go that route.
Thank you, Ms. Appleby. I'll give up the floor for now.
Commissioner Krishna.
Thank you. I have a few questions, some of which might be better answered by the petitioner, but I'll state them now. The first is there a difference between the amount of right-of-way that would need to be acquired for the different alternatives? And if so, could you describe the impacts to landowners in the area? The second question I have is that perhaps I'll note that the community councils that provided comments were all uniformly against elevated Seward Highway. And I think that's important to state and important to know why. And, without that much further information, I would guess that maybe there's some overpass design considerations as to sort of safety and pedestrian access. And I wonder how those have been addressed. Thank you.
Commissioner Krishna, I'll refer to the details about the right-of-way to the petitioner. I did note in my staff report, all three loop ramp alternatives share the same impacts to property access was one of the items. There are minor differences though between, sorry, I have that wrong. So there are minor differences among the three alternatives with right-of-way. And the right-of-way would be needed to facilitate construction of the ramps and frontage roads. So I'll refer that one to the petitioner for the details of the right-of-way acquisition. And the community councils, the documentation was in the application for some of the outreach. The comments that we received for this case when we notified community councils, we just received comments from Rogers Park, so that's why that community council is the one discussed in the staff report, since they're the only ones who submitted comments specific to this case. Although the petitioner could probably speak to some of the public outreach they've had with other community councils in the area.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions pending, I'm happy to hear from the petitioner. If there is someone available to speak to this. Sorry, there's a little mouth button there to turn on the mic.
Sorry about that.
Perfect. Oh, no, it went off again. You just got to touch it really lightly.
All
And then
right.
if you could lift it up a little bit too, to make sure it captures you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alex Reed. I'm the project manager from DOT, and with me is Steve Noble. He is the consultant project manager.
Good evening. Good to be here tonight. Appreciate your time to answer any questions you might have. We do have I think I left it on the chair. We do have a few slides that I could give you a little bit of a briefing, a little bit of background. I think it would take me 10 minutes. It might answer some of your questions, or I can just answer your questions as you throw them at me. Which would you prefer?
I think some background could be helpful if you were to do that first.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, this is the 36th Avenue Interchange Job. It's the first of the projects that came forward from the Midtown Congestion Relief PEL study, which was completed, was completed in 2020. It essentially was a 2-year process for 2018, 2019, and in the spring of 2020, it was completed. It recommended 5 projects. 2 of those projects were at the 36th Avenue intersection. One was an at-grade interim step, and then a second one was to bring it to fully to an interchange. The department made the decision to go to include both of those projects in one and to move forward with that project. This is not the first time, of course, that 36th Avenue Interchange has been studied. It's been studied several times. In fact, as recently as 2015, this project was actually advanced to a 35% design stage, and the Rogers Park Community Council and others, but largely Rogers Park Community Council were largely unhappy with the alternative that was chosen because it did not have full access to the north. And so the department decided to put that project on pause, widen it out, and look at the larger issues in Midtown. That led to the PEL study. Then the PEL study had a much more extensive public outreach process and planning process that lasted about 2 years. Multiple public meetings, 8 community councils involved. I personally have been to Rogers Park Community Council every meeting for the last 4 years except for 2. And so there's been almost unprecedented, at least in my experience as an engineer, public involvement, public outreach in this region, or in this area for this project. So as of today, we have initiated the NEPA process, and this project was determined to be a CE. Right now, the preliminary engineering process, as you know, this is a DOT project. It's following the federal process, not the municipality's process, so the steps don't line up the same way that they do for the municipality. So when you see design study report, we don't actually have authority to proceed with design yet. So that's why it's called an alternatives analysis for us. We have to complete the environmental document before we can start the design process. But we have, through the PEL process, been able to identify and narrow the alternatives. The federal legislation for the PEL process does allow us to identify our alternatives and even narrow it down to 1 or 2 alternatives that can move forward into the NEPA process. And then the NEPA is able to be streamlined because we can build on that public outreach effort and that NEPA process that occurred, or that alternatives analysis that occurred pre-NEPA. So we are in the process now of completing the CSS process. This summer, the noise study is going to be going on. That'll be an extensive noise analysis. And then we have an open house scheduled for April 19th in the library. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the loop ramp alternative and why it was chosen, how we got to this point. We essentially came out of the PEL study with 2 options, as was mentioned by staff. There was a median U-turn option and a loop ramp alternative. Essentially, the median U-turn option was determined later to have some operational fatal flaws and is not being continued any further. And so the loop ramp is the preferred interchange concept. And then for a variety of other reasons, specifically related to non-motorized access, smaller intersections, improved safety, there are some extensive hydrology issues related to why the Seward Highway is recommended to go over, and then from a constructability standpoint. And I don't have an hour and a half to tell you all of the details, so some of these things I'll gloss over, and you'll have to ask me in more details if you would like to see them or to hear about them. So this is a rendering of what the loop ramp concept looks like. So here's 36th Avenue, and the loop ramp loops around like this and goes up and over. Seward Highway goes up and over. And then this is a full access interchange. Okay, that's one of the things that we heard loud and clear from the Rogers Park Community Council. Previously, they did not have the ability to go north from 36th Avenue in the concept for the 36th Avenue interchange. That has been changed in this concept. You do have the ability to go all directions from 36th and all directions from Tudor Road. The way that this is occurring, because we have such closely spaced intersections, is that we're putting in braided ramps at the frontage roads back here close to Tudor Road. So you can see that if you're actually getting off to go to 36th, you have to get off back here, you'd go under the Tudor Bridge, under the on-ramp from Tudor Road, come along the frontage road, and then make a right turn or left turn onto 36th. Same thing in the other direction. The frontage road goes under the off-ramp to Tudor Road. So we have this bridge. We also have two bridges back here. And so operationally, that's essentially how it works. One of the things we heard loud and clear from the very beginning of this project is that non-motorized was one of the community's highest priorities. We heard that they wanted improved east-west access. We heard they wanted signalized crossings. We heard they wanted grade separations where they could get them. And we heard that they wanted north-south mobility along Seward Highway. And so the dashed lines are where there exists connections today, and the solid lines are what are proposed connections, and then you can see where this project is. So this project is filling in non-motorized gaps in the Seward Highway pedestrian mobility network. On both sides of the Seward Highway, there'll be new connections that will enable you to go along the outside of the frontage roads along the Seward Highway. And then there's other things proposed as part of the overall Midtown Congestion Relief Project, but related to this project, that's the primary element, along with the grade separation of non-motorized access being able to get across Seward Highway. So key features of the loop ramp concept, again, new pathways along Seward Highway, elevated highway over 36th. We got one-way frontage roads in both directions, full access at 36th and Tudor. We are resolving the driveway issues in front of Moose's Tooth and Big Ray's and along the old Seward Highway. Those issues are being resolved from a circulation perspective. We are getting greater signal space between. There's still going to be one signal on 36th Avenue So the old Seward Highway intersection will remain largely in its existing location, although there'll be some changes to it. There'll still be a smaller signal here, but we have a greater separation distance, and we have a much fewer lanes, only 3 or 4 lanes to have to cross for each leg of the pedestrian movement, instead of the 8 or 9 lanes that they have to cross today when you include all the auxiliary lanes. So one of the main challenges and concerns, of course, has been Seward Highway over or under, and that was a big consideration during the PEL study. The PEL study recommends Seward Highway going over 36th, and it recommends Seward Highway going under Benson, Northern Lights, and Fireweed. It is close, but there is room to go over 36th and still get under Benson Boulevard based on the profile. As you can see, this maroon kind of exaggeration of the profile, it is possible to get over and then under Benson in the future. Everything we're doing on this project is forward compatible with the recommendations for the future Midtown Congestion Relief Project, which essentially is putting Seward Highway down in a trench and allowing Benson, Northern Lights, and Fireweed all to cross at grade in their existing alignments. So one of the main problems we have in this area is that there's a water table that's down only about
I guess
4 feet.
that's the end of the allotted time. I guess for myself, I'd be happy to hear the rest of the initial presentation, although maybe you can give a sense of how much.
Give me 5 more minutes and I'll wrap it up.
Okay, is everyone comfortable with that? All right, thank you.
I could talk to all night, so I'll try to wrap it up. So I know one of the main issues is Seward Highway going under, over. There's a water table that's down 4 feet, and so we don't really have the ability to depress any of the roads more than they really are today, because we need about at least 4 feet of free draining material under the asphalt in order to avoid having breakup issues every spring and asphalt being torn up. And so in order to take Seward Highway under, we'd have to start way back here. We'd have to start cutting and go down, and then we'd have to design the highway so that it was essentially watertight. If you go into the MCR report, there are 2 options for doing that. To design it watertight requires 2 feet. It requires 1 foot thick of concrete under the highway for every 2 foot below the water table you are. So in order to get under 36, we'd be down approximately need a slab of about 10 foot thick of concrete under the highway in order to resist the buoyant forces of the water table. And everything would have to be watertight. The alternative is that you design it so that it drains out towards Chester Creek. By the time you get out to Fireweed Lane, you're down at about a 55 foot depth below ground surface. And so it's just from a constructability, from an impacts to Midtown perspective, it's not realistic. You could put a little bowl here, and then in perpetuity, you would have to have a lift station that would pump that water and artificially drain down the water table in 36th Avenue. Now, again, our team determined that was not realistic. To give you some perspective, the interchange for 36th Avenue, the Seward Highway only has to be elevated 10 feet higher than the existing highway is at the midpoint between Tudor and 36. You don't realize it, but the Seward Highway goes up and then comes back down. And to continue that up, it only has to be 10 feet higher than the Seward Highway already is at this point. And then I'll also point out that the height of the bridge over 36th Avenue is visually, if you're out there looking at this area, that height of that bridge is the same elevation as the bottom of the noise wall that's by Geneva Woods. So that neighborhood can't even see this highway unless they're up on the 2nd floor of their home, because the top of the bridge is lower than the Geneva Woods, than that noise wall that's protecting them from this highway noise. So so you can see that this area is kind of up on a hill. We've determined that this is the preferred alternative. It still has to go through the noise analysis. We're still going to go through and determine what are the impacts to the neighborhood, and then try to figure out what the best way to design it is. So I've got some cross sections. You've got those in your packet. I'm not going to go through them in great detail, but we've got some renderings of what this will look like. We wanted the community to be able to see what does the Seward Highway over 36th Avenue look like. This is an actual to-scale drawing of what that would look like. This is 36th Avenue looking east towards the Jacobs building. This is if you're at the sidewalk in front of Moose's Tooth in the future. Okay, so there's a one-way road, one-way frontage road going north, and you can see Seward Highway going over 36th. This is from that Geneva Woods neighborhood. Again, you can't see the cars until you get up 20 feet in the air before you can see them. And there is our schedule for moving ahead. We don't have construction dollars identified yet for this project. We still are several years out from going to actual construction, but this project will take some time because we got to get the environmental document finished, get final design, right-of-way acquisition. Following the federal process, we're at least 4 years out probably. That's probably being optimistic, but we're at least 4 years out.
Okay, thank you. We've got a couple of questions here. Commissioner Strike?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. Yes, and thank you for the changes. I mean, I sat through this presentation, I believe, in 2015 when it was presented here, and this new proposal is demonstrably different than what was presented back then. And I saw everything addressed and concerned that I recall that came up during that period of time. But I wanted you to walk me through the bicycle traffic using the map. That was one question. And the other was the grade level between the elevated at 36 and Benson. What would you, I know that was overly characterized on your map, but what would you characterize that grade to be? And the reason I'm asking is that Benson now becomes the first stoplight as you're traveling north into the city, whereas it used to be 36, and back in the day it used to be Tudor. And so you're slowing down a massive amount of traffic, and the speed limit is changing as we're coming down in ratchets as we come into the corridor, so to speak. But the concern I have is when I watch at 36, the large trucks, wintertime, downshifting, coming in, streets are slick, and right now at 36 is the little bit of the bottleneck. Now we're going to shift that bottleneck down to Benson. Is that fair statement?
Yep. So
with a hill now, or some sort of grade.
Sure. Let me address the second question first, then I'll come back to the bike question. And Sam Tyler is our project engineer and probably can tell me the exact grade to the 100th decimal place. But in general, I can tell you that the speed change, the speed transition that is currently out there today, we're not proposing that will move. That's not going to change as part of this 36th Avenue project. We're still going to transition people from the 65 down to the 55, down to the 45 at the exact locations they are today, because there's no space to do that after 36th Avenue. So we're going to continue that speed transition right where it is. And then the other thing is that we're designing the Midtown freeway, if you will, the future freeway, if you will, for a maximum posted speed of 55 miles per hour, not maximum posted speed of 65 miles per hour. So in the future, when Seward Highway is under Benson, Northern Lights, and Fireweed, and it's gone through the Glen Seward mobility study, and the freeway continues on and connects to Glen Highway, it's anticipated from the department made the decision that a 55 mile per hour speed for that highway would be sufficient and not a 65 mile per hour speed. So that's what we're designing for. And as far as the gradient on this road, it's not maxed out, but it's probably pretty close for that speed. What is it, 3.5? 3.6 to 3.7% gradient. So our goal is to stay below 4% when we've got a slope, and generally we try to stay below 3.5. But so we're on that margin. This is not anticipated to be this way forever, but the project to go under Benson, Northern Lights, and Fireweed, it's a $150 to $200 million job that's not funded yet either, and it's out there a ways. So this will be in place probably for some amount of time, who knows how long, but from a safety perspective, we feel like this is still an improvement over what's out there today. Now,
and just to
bike lanes. So if you're a bicyclist, and we actually talked a lot to the bicycling community as part of this project, but the bike lanes stay on the outside of the frontage roads. You don't have to worry about the braided configurations. If you're on Tudor Road, you can go, or on 36th Avenue, you can stay on the outside of it here. The same thing on 36th, you stay on the outside of it and connecting in, just as you would along Brayton Drive or one of the other frontage roads that are down. These frontage roads are going to be they're going to feel more urban. If you look at the cross-section, they're not rural cross-sections. They have curb and gutter. They're going to feel more urban, and they're going to be designed for somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 to 40 miles an hour speed, not 45 like Brayton or or Homer Drive are further to the south. If you're on the other side of the road, this area does get changed up a little bit. If you're a motorist on Old Seward Highway and you want to get to Moose's Tooth, you will no longer be able to get to them by going northbound through Old Seward. That's why we have this proposed connection here. If you want to get to Moose's Tooth from Old Seward, you got to turn left and then right, and then you can come in through one of these other roads to get into those restaurants. If you're going northbound on Old Seward Highway, you'll get routed onto the loop ramp and brought onto the freeway. And then in the southbound direction, there's an off-ramp that does provide access to these businesses. In the future, when this goes under Benson, there is room being designed for an additional lane that will be between the loop ramp and which will be an on-ramp coming from from Benson Boulevard.
And pedestrian foot traffic going west on 36 underneath the highway?
Yep. There'll be nice wide pedestrian walkways crossing underneath 36th on both sides of the highway. What those exactly look like, we haven't figured out yet. We will be having a landscape architect working on the project who's going to help us. We've got some concepts here, but that's really all we've done so far is some concepts, and specifics about what those things are going to look like has not been figured out yet.
Is there significant property taken from the
So the DOT already owns...
Golden Lion Hotel?
Sorry, yes. From a right-of-way acquisition perspective, the only full take that remains as part of this project is the Sushi Ya property. On the east side of the road, there is some unpermitted parking from the Geneva Woods Medical Facility here that's unpermitted in the DOT right-of-way, and so they will lose that unpermitted parking. And then not Golden.
Whatever it is now.
Whatever it is. Anyways, the former Best Western, they have a revocable lease of parking in the right-of-way that has to be renewed every 3 years. And Renee, has that already been revoked? It's been revoked? It has been revoked. Yeah. So I think that's already been revoked. And then there probably will be some very minor, what we're calling constructability easements along the edges of that property so that we can make sure that the drainage works and that the driveway matches in with the pedestrian facilities and those kinds of things. But we're not planning on acquiring the hotel as part of this project.
Well, the good news is I think we heard a case earlier today in our work session that might take care of the that site's parking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Also, I shouldn't say revoked. It was when the business was sold, it doesn't go with the business. So it's no longer in place.
Good clarification. There is some right-of-way acquisition fully along this side as well that we have not nailed down exactly what that's going to look like yet, but part of it's going to be in the negotiation with the property owners. We need to decide if we're going to acquire all the space that we'll ultimately need for the entire Midtown congestion relief improvements, which includes going under Benson, or if we'll just acquire what we need specifically for this project and then hit them again in 10 years for some more space. So.
Commissioner Run.
Thank you, through the chair. Mr. Noble, thanks for the presentation. The renderings are helpful, as are the drawings in their current form. I'll second Commissioner Strike's comments around concern of pushing the highway into an already troubled intersection. And I'll ask my first question around the crash and traffic data supporting the summary conclusions that we see in this, what I'm calling a DSR summary report. Where is that data? Is it from the PEL for Midtown Congestion Relief, or was it redone or updated specific for 36th Avenue Interchange?
Yeah, the data that's in there is taken from the Midtown Congestion Relief PEL study that was completed
Okay,
immediately prior to this, yeah.
so I see stapled onto the back of our packet tabular data. Is that all we have before us to look at as far as data is concerned?
I don't have the packet in front of me,
Okay.
so I'm not exactly sure what you're looking at. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for more crash data, you know what, we get new data every year, but we have a lot of crash data to support the fact that 36th Avenue and Benson and Northern Lights and Fireweed are almost always in the top 10 intersections from a safety and from a capacity problems perspective.
Appreciate the general commentary to that effect. I did dig back into that Midtown Congestion Relief PEL and look at some of the crash data, and that data from 2005 to 2014 is showing no major injury pedestrian or bicycle crashes at 36th and Seward, but it sure is showing them at that Benson and Seward location. So I think a founded concern there. Can you help the commission understand what a CE is?
Sure. A CE is a federal highways in the legislation for NEPA. They generate what they call are projects that are categorically excluded from additional environmental documentation. And in order to qualify for a CE, you have to do a certain amount of environmental documentation. So you qualify for a CE, but you still have to check all the boxes that are necessary to demonstrate that there are no significant impacts. So an EA, if you don't know if there's no significant impacts, then you generally will go through the EA process so that you can determine if there's any impact, in which you'll get either a finding of no significant impacts or a finding of significant impacts. In the case of a CE, projects like this that meet certain criteria, that appear to meet the requirements that can be covered by a categorically excluded project, we head down that path. It is possible that it can change, but that's the determination that's made by the department at the very beginning of a project based on the characterizations of the project.
I appreciate that description. Could you help the commission understand the level of rigor for the environmental analysis for a CE versus an EA versus an EIS?
So Alex works for DOT and is probably better qualified to answer this, but I guess from my perspective, I've been doing this for 26 years, and I can tell you that from my experience, and I did the Glen Muldoon Interchange, which was also a CE, by the way. We had a lot of the same characteristics of the Glen Muldoon Interchange that we do here at the 36th Avenue Interchange, and the Glen Burgaw Interchange was also a CE, and we had 4F criteria issues. We had cultural resources, we had right-of-way acquisition, we had all these different things. And the level of effort for a CE, in my experience, particularly for one that's got this much public scrutiny, is very comparable to an EA from an effort perspective. The differences, in my view, are mostly process. There's some additional process, additional steps, additional boxes that have to be checked from a advertising and maybe from a documentation perspective. But I'll let you comment on any further.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a good summary. We're going through a similar process no matter which form of environmental document we have. It's how we're documenting it in our actual environmental document that changes, and how many different alternatives we have to document to the same level changes between each one. A CE is kind of one of the simpler processes as far as documentation goes, but we still go through all the public involvement, look at all the impacts, so there isn't huge differences in that concept.
Yeah, I mean, the noise study on this project is the biggest noise study I've ever done in 26 years. It's, the noise study on this job is $350,000 to do the noise study for this job. It's a big effort because we got a long corridor here, and there's a lot of scrutiny on it. And the interesting thing is, when noise study was also done in 2014, and at that time it did not meet the reasonableness and feasibility criteria. So it'll be interesting to see if the noise policy has changed enough to get a different result this time.
Well, thank you for that commentary, and it's good to hear an acknowledgement of public concern and response to gather some data and understand what the potential impacts could be. I just get a little nervous when we start looking at a preferred alternative that hasn't done that yet. So earlier you mentioned alternatives analysis as part of the CE, and yet we see a preferred alternative here. Are these alternatives that we have in this DSR study report, is that what's going into the CE alternatives analysis, or could there be other alternatives that are developed?
So there's two parts to that. One is that the federal legislation for the PEL process as part of FHWA's Everyday Counts program allows the alternatives analysis process that is done during the PEL process to be carried forward into NEPA, provided that it's done in a reasonable timeline. And in this case, they were done back to back with when we started this project. There was not 5 years in between or anything like that. So we're able to take that effort and use that to help. The whole point of the Everyday Counts and the PEL process is to give it a much more rigorous upfront effort so that we don't run into problems later, like in 2014 when we found out we couldn't go northbound and we got a project all the way to 35% design and then we stopped it. That's the whole point of the PEL process, is that we don't shortcut anything. We actually do more upfront with the goal of not having a fatal flaw later on. And so it has had a very rigorous alternatives analysis, but the beauty, I guess, of the PEL, of the NEPA process from the public's perspective is they can comment whenever they want, and we're going to listen. and alternatives it is possible that other alternatives might arise, but the alternatives that you see in the documentation that you've been given, those are the alternatives that we envision at this point. We believe we've had a very exhaustive process. We had a lot of alternatives done during the PEL process, and I won't say that every single one you can conceive of, but it was every one I could conceive of at the time.
Thanks for that history. If I may, just two final questions, or I can give it the floor and come back to it.
We've got a couple of people in the queue, so we can move on, but feel free, Commissioner Ron, to hop back in. Commissioner Krishna.
Thank you. I'm looking at some of the cross sections of both the highway and 36th Avenue, and I'm wondering if at some point in the process you had considered separated pathways for both bicycles and pedestrians. I know that's really ideal, and I will say as a bicyclist who goes through this intersection, it's really quite unpleasant to bike right next to traffic with the speed and amount of traffic that we're considering, especially if we're going up to 55 miles per hour. So I know you've probably got right-of-way limitations here, but I'm really wondering if you can speak to that, because non-separated pathways for pedestrians and bicyclists for the intersection that we're talking about, in my mind, is not a tremendous improvement over what we have right now unless we're significantly expanding the width of the sidewalk.
Good question. And to be honest with you, from a personal perspective and a professional perspective, I 100% agree with you. So from a separation perspective, we're going to separate the pathway wherever we can. There are a few pinch points where it becomes very, very difficult. And I'll be honest with you, the pinch points are right here next to this road, because we've got a fire lane for the mall on one side and we've got this road on the other side. And so there is a spot right here where our trail is going to come right up next to the frontage road, and then it's going to separate again. And the same thing here. But then we're going to pull it off and have it separated as much as we can. I can't commit to it yet because we're not through the process yet, and I don't know how much of it's going to be able to be separated, but we're going to try to get as much of it separated as we can because of that safety issue. We do have some challenging issues. There's the Helen Louise McDowell Sanctuary on this side of the road, which I would love to have it separated and become part of that, pull it off more into the sanctuary and have that trail be a much more pleasant experience. But we have not had those conversations yet with Parks and Rec and the folks that have the stewardship over that land. And, we are anticipating that we're going to need to take a little bit of land off the front of that Helen Louise McDowell Sanctuary. And to be honest with you, in anticipation of that, and you can't see it very well, but so here's the sanctuary right here, and then DOT actually purchased this corner lot with the anticipation that we would be able to make the Helen Louise McDowell Sanctuary whole with whatever space we need to acquire for the road and for the trail. So we've got some good solutions in mind for that, but again, those conversations with that entity have not occurred yet. So we've got some challenges for where we're going to be able to get in tight for where the walkways are going to be, but we're going to be tight here by the Golden Lion, we're going to be tight here by Geneva Woods, but then we should be able to pull off a little ways, then we should be able to pull off by the McDowell. Back here, I think we'll be able to pull off a little ways, but it's going to be a mix, and where it's up against it, we're going to design, and you should know, we're never going to be up against the 55-mile-an-hour road. We're only up against the frontage road, which 35, 40 tops for posted speeds. Okay?
Thank you.
Commissioner Rod, did you have further questions?
I'll keep it brief. Mr. Noble, has the public had a chance to weigh in on what we're seeing before us tonight in its current form? I understand that community councils have seen it, but has the public at large?
This was the alternative that was identified as the preferred alternative in the final meeting of the Midtown Congestion Relief Project. So yes, they have seen it. It's had some refinements, but this was the exact one of two concepts that was the two concepts that were recommended that come out of the PEL study. This one and the median U-turn concept, which we have later determined not to be, had fatal flaws from an operational standpoint. So they have seen this, and we're going back out there again in April to let them know that, to show them there's these refinements and give them another chance to look at it.
Thanks.
We didn't have as good a graphics then. We've done better graphics since then. So that's one of the things we're trying to do, is help the public be able to visualize it. It's not easy for everybody to visualize it, and the graphics we have now are better than we had before. So we're looking forward to actually getting it out there to the public and giving them a chance to see it. Because I think it's a lot easier for people to understand what we're talking about now. Yeah.
So I have a question about the planned future kind of transition in work then through Benson and Northern Lights and Fireweed. I know, and I think I saw one of the comments from the Rogers Park Community Council spoke to the issues that are identified, I think it's on page 29 of the report, about reasons why it didn't make sense to go underneath 36. And it mentioned the water table, but other issues as well. And I was wondering if you could speak briefly to how you anticipate those playing out in the future, and both with respect to any other issues other than the water table and for the water as well, since it looks like you've got the same kind of narrow band to work with there in the future.
Yeah, so I will tell you that there is the preferred alternative that came from the PEL study is for the Seward Highway to go under Benson, Northern Lights, and Fireweed. They will have to go out and do another planning study if they choose to do a different option, because that's the option that came out of that PEL study, and that's the option that the public understands is the preferred option. The NEPA process, of course, hasn't been done, so nothing's locked, nothing's set in stone yet. There's going to be more public process, but right now that's fully, catch me if I say something too strong here, Alex, but that from my knowledge of the department's perspective, that is their intent, is to pursue a project that takes the Seward Highway under Benson, Northern Lights, Fireweed, and it still requires a deep trench. Even going underneath just those three roads, it's still 40 feet deep by the time you hit the bluff. But there's still enough room, there's still enough elevation to come out the bluff and to be able to make the drainage work and to be able to still get over the top of a new bridge for Chester Creek Greenbelt. That's another thing that's included in that last project, is to get rid of this awful pipe culvert here and the fish passage culverts there that are a barrier, and to put a full bridge in at that location. So you can get under, and then over, and make the geometry work. In these locations, you do not have to pump the water, because we'll be able to put in perforated pipe drains underneath the freeway, we'll have it'll draw down the water table in the immediate vicinity of the highway, and it will drain out to the bluff, and then it'll drain to Chester Creek. To do that from all the way back here, it's just incredibly deep and unrealistic, and you can't get over the top. By the time you get out here, you got to then go up and over Chester Creek. So it's just not realistic. So the only option really to putting Seward under 36th is to put a lift station in like you would a sanitary sewer lift station, where you collect all the water and pump that water and draw out the water table from the ground and pump it in perpetuity. So you got the cost of lift station, and you got an ongoing maintenance cost of pumping that down. And if it ever failed, you immediately have water buoyant pressure on the bottom of the road. And unless you've designed to resist that, like I said, it's very difficult to resist those buoyancy forces. So from the community's perspective, we know that this is their higher priority from a kind of a community center perspective. This is the area where they do not want us. They don't want us to do anything here that's going to force the Seward Highway to go over, or allow the Seward Highway to go over Benson, Northern Lights, or Fireway did, and that is not at all the intent. And all the documents that have been generated so far have it going under. But the pedestrian improvements in this area, in fact, not only going under, but also having kind of a cut and cover kind of park green space over the top of kind of all between Benson and Northern Lights and halfway over to Fireweed as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And then maybe relatedly, given that obviously there's lots of things that need to take place and kind of conditions that need to be satisfied before this thing gets all the way through, but assuming this project gets complete, and then when it moves to the next phase for Benson, Northern Lights, and Fireweed, how much of what's done here needs to be kind of torn up in a way to make it work for the next phase?
Very good question. So surprisingly little, to be honest with you. Surprisingly little. From a, assuming Sam's the good designer that he is, and he is, the geometry, probably about halfway, certainly halfway to. We've designed this so that once you get to about here, the grades will match up with going directly under. But all of the structures are designed to be forward compatible with the future configuration, so that we don't have to tear out any of these old bridges or the retaining walls or things like that. They're all going to be designed to be forward compatible. We've got enough spacing for that additional lane. As I told you on this figure, it's hard to tell, but there is an on-ramp coming from this direction that comes up and will merge in with the Seward Highway over the top, and so how that exact structure is going to be designed is not yet figured out, but it will be forward compatible, and this does not have to be torn apart and rebuilt. But from a grades perspective, from about here on, I would say you're going to have to regrade down to be able to get down and go under Benson Boulevard.
Thank you.
Just the eastbound, or just the northbound? Oh yeah, that's the other thing, is that the lanes also shift. If you look at the full build out, this frontage road goes more like this alignment. It goes actually across takes part of the parking from the old BP building, from the Hillcorp building, or I'm not sure who owns it now. But yeah, so this widens out significantly through here in the future. So like that website is actually still active, right, Renee? You can go to midtowncongestionrelief.com and look at the proposed alternative there if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Okay, any other thoughts or questions from the commission, or I guess we could look for a motion otherwise? Motion by Commissioner Winchester.
In the case of 2022-0023, Context-Sensitive Solutions Design Study Report, Review for Seward Highway 36 Avenue Interchange Project, I recommend approval with the conditions on page 11 of our staff packet, including advisory comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Winchester. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Commissioner Winchester, feel free to speak to your motion.
Yeah, I just appreciate all the work that's gone into this and all the effort tying past studies, moving this project forward. I've been involved in transportation a lot of years, and this one's been a tough one. It'd be nice to see it move forward.
Commissioner Ron.
Oh, apologies, Commissioner, and to the Commission. I cede the floor to Commissioner Krishna if she'd like to speak to the motion first.
And my apologies, Commissioner Krishna, if you had comments you wanted to provide.
No, go ahead, Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Commissioner Krishna and Chair. Fellow Commissioners, this is a tough one for me. I live in the neighborhood. We all probably use this intersection quite frequently. As Commissioner Winchester commented, it's been a long time in the works with a number of different iterations. I appreciate the history that Commissioner Strike shared in terms of this being a vast improvement. That said, I have some reservations in terms of how the process has gone recently. We heard this in January, but the DSR study report we're now looking at was already submitted, so what discussion we had at that meeting wasn't incorporated. I don't intend to support the motion. I would like to see this go out for public hearing and give the public ample opportunity to continue to engage on this very impactful project. Not to say I don't support the preferred alternative in its current form. I don't support acting on it without that additional opportunity for public input.
So I guess I'd be happy to hear any comments from staff in terms of recommendations, but I think one option, well, I guess I'll turn it over to staff if they have suggestions for how to proceed, if it would be a motion to put forward to possibly postpone and put out for public hearing at this point, or if you might have a suggestion.
Chair Gardner, yes, I believe that you could put forward a motion to hold a public hearing for the case. But in the interim from when Commissioner Ron first asked about timing of that, it's 21 days notice. We checked the PZC schedule, so April 11th would be the first meeting where a public hearing could be held and still meet the notice requirements if you want to go that route.
Thank you. Commissioner Krishna?
Yes, maybe I have a more specific question for staff that can address that concern. Could you let us know what the upcoming opportunities for public involvement are in regards to this intersection design?
Commissioner Krishna, I'd have to defer to the petitioner on specific open houses or things that are project specific. As far as the municipal review, so this is the 35% design for the DSR. After the Planning and Zoning Commission, it would come back to us at the plans in hand design, so the 55 or 65% level, that would go before the Urban Design Commission. Code says that public hearings for the design study report and the plans in hand are at the discretion of the commissions for both Planning and Zoning and Urban Design Commission. So it'll at least come back plans in hands to the municipality. people could comment on the case, but it's up to the commission if it's a public hearing or not.
And just as a clarification, of course, the entire packet that we're seeing before us today went out for public review as well and was available to the public. That's correct, right?
That's correct, Commissioner Krishna. So we followed code requirements for notice, so community councils were notified. We only heard back from Rogers Park, but the case was online and publicly noticed as required in code.
Commissioner Spinelli.
Would it be possible to hear from the commissioner on future public input? Because I was under the impression that he mentioned something about the public having ample opportunity in the future. Or the petitioner, I'm sorry.
And I guess I'll just add related to that, the presentation included a reference to an April 19th open house, and maybe you could speak to what's planned for that.
Sure. There's at least 2 more open houses in the future. I say at least because we don't know for sure how long it'll take, but how long this project's going to go on. But there is a second one, and I'm actually correcting myself, Renee. We actually had the Midtown public meetings, then we had another open house to kick off the 36th Avenue Interchange. So we've actually already had 1 open house on this project, specifically after the Midtown. And then so number 2 is coming up April 19th, 2022. And then the third one will probably be, I don't know when for sure, but usually we would do it sometime around the completion of the environmental document so that we can let the public know here is the final determination on the preferred alternative. We anticipate that and to give them a chance to provide feedback on that before it's kind of finalized and set in stone. But we anticipate this open house. We're continuing to go to all the open house, all the community council meetings particularly for Russian Jack Community Council. I'm a permanent resident. I'm a permanent guest, I should say, on their agenda. And Renee, can you refresh my memory on any other public involvement opportunities? The transportation fairs will be on the transportation fairs every year. What's that? Oh, did I say Russian Jack? I meant Rogers Park. Sorry, I go to too many community councils. So it'll be Rogers Park's the one I meant to say that I've been attending. So at least 2 more, and plus all the community council meetings, and that's all I can think of, plus the transportation fairs.
Commissioner Strick.
Just for point of clarification, right now we're in conceptual design, so there is no 35% design, which I thought I heard earlier. And the other point was the open houses and so forth are informal gatherings without the context of that information coming to a commission or to the city in a formal manner. So I can support the previous commissioner's notion of showing an on-the-record public testimony for this type of project that might go hand in hand with open houses and so forth, but as a commission, we don't hear what those open houses we don't hear the context. We don't hear what is derived at those meetings. And there's no official record and so forth taken. And the same goes with the community council meetings and so forth. I think a project of this magnitude, I don't want to be on the receiving end of saying, why didn't this go before a public hearing? And I think it's important that the public be given an opportunity in a formal setting to hear that public, to give that public comment, and that it be heard by a commission. Thank you.
Commissioner Eber.
I tend to agree with the other commissioners that it should go through public hearing. I am curious, though, as to, I guess, what the turnout at the open houses has been. Have you been getting a good, have you been getting a good turnout, so to speak?
Yes, Commissioner, through the chair, we have been getting very good turnout. I would say generally between 80 and 200 people for all of the meetings that we've had so far. In terms of open house meetings in my 25 years, they're some of the most well-attended, unless it's been really controversial like Avenue Extension was years ago. Renee, can you correct me? I think we might have had as many as 250 one time. Okay. So good turnout. And I will say also that our open houses have been not just an open house where everybody kind of dry stands around. We've actually had presentations, opportunities for people to stand and ask and give feedback at all of the Midtown congestion. All the PEL studies were not just a dry open house wander around type thing. They were hopefully you got the chance to come to them. But they were at the LUSAC library, and then in the adjacent auditorium, we would give a presentation, give the mic around to people to be able to give their comments and be able to answer. And there is written documentation of all those meetings that you're welcome to, we can share with you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Spinelli.
One more question, please.
Getting your steps in for the day.
The commission seems to be pretty in favor of a public hearing. I guess I just wanted to know from you or hear from you, if we drag you back here in 8 weeks and postpone a resolution out to, say, 10 weeks, 9 weeks, what does that do for your process? Because I did hear you say that this is a very long process, so I don't know if us doing that is really holding you back at all. I guess I just want to get a sense for that.
If you're asking me if there's anything on the critical path that this will cause us to delay, I would say not that I can think of. Would you want to respond to that comment at all? Does anybody else have anything they can think of that this would impact? No. Thanks.
If I could just provide a point of information for the commission. So if you do want to go the public hearing route, I recommend a motion would be to postpone and hold the public hearing. You don't have to specify the date, but as we've discussed, it would be April 11th. That's all I just wanted to share for clarification.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you through the Commissioner. Ms. Appleby, thank you for that additional note. I would have interest in, as we just heard from the petitioner, no impact to critical path scheduling the public hearing such that it was open after their planned open house in April. So that would push it out perhaps to the meeting after that.
Commissioner Ron, there is a meeting in April. The April 11th is actually the first meeting that month. We're a week later just with election scheduling conflicts. So there is a meeting April 18th. Otherwise, it would be the first and second Mondays in May.
As Mr. Noble has made it back to his seat, I'll ask how that jives with is there a date certain on the next April open house for the project?
Can you turn your mic on? Sorry.
I should have it down by now. Is the April 19th date set in stone? Yeah. We have the building reserved out here, so I can tell you that. And, hasn't been advertised beyond tonight, and we've given the community councils a heads up that it's going to be in April, but that we'll let them know this month for sure which day. So we think it's going to be the 19th.
Okay, so at the moment, we have our motion to approve that's pending, and if there was a desire to delay, I think we would need to have some sort of motion to that effect. Otherwise, we'll just vote on this motion, and I think, staff, correct me if I'm wrong, if we deny, if this motion fails to pass, then that's the end of it, right?
One second, let me just scroll down. I was going to remind the commission of their options. Okay, so you can review and act to approve with conditions, which is what's in the staff report, or you may also return the application to the project management team for additional work. I do think, I may look for a colleague to chime in, but I do think if you deny, then you're, yes, yeah, if you deny this motion that's currently on the table, then you're done, yes. To answer your question, Chair Gardner, was that clear?
I think so. I think just looking to confirm that there'd be no issue with the pending motion to layer on top of that. I don't know if it'd be considered to kind of delay ruling on that motion pending a future public hearing that we request. Okay. So I guess I've received confirmation from the expert here that we can have a motion to postpone, which would supersede the pending motion. So if a commissioner is interested in a motion to postpone, Commissioner Ron.
Move to postpone to a time certain.
Okay, and if there's a specific date or time that you would prefer to include in that motion?
When I read that from the screen, I realized time certain meant that I would need to select a date, and I don't intend to do so. I would like staff and the petitioner to confer on what would be the most appropriate date to get this back before the commission, understanding that there is an open house in April that may be instructive one way or the other.
Okay, are you, I guess,
So if I could amend my motion, it would be just a motion to postpone, asking
okay.
staff and... Yeah.
I think I could speak on behalf of staff and the petitioner in that I think it would be helpful if there's some guidance for when we would like to hear the case further. So if it would be after the open house or something that they could base the postponement around.
I would like to hear it after the open house.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone until after the planned open house, seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Commissioner Ron, would you like to speak to your motion?
I think I have spoken enough.
Commissioner Krishna, I'll give you an opportunity since you seconded if you wish to make any comments.
I intend to support this motion. I agree with the previous comments from the other commissioners that this is one of the busiest intersections in our city and more public process, especially given the high level of interest, is a good thing. Thank you.
Because I'll just note for myself, I intend to support it as well. We heard from the petitioner, and just to have something on the record for this particular motion, that they don't anticipate this would affect the critical path in any way. And although this has been a really involved process, and we've seen a lot of comments from various community councils in our materials, we haven't had a chance to hear directly from them ourselves, and I think it could be beneficial to have some of their commentary on the record before us as well, and potentially any new information that may come from the planned open house.
Chair Gardner and Commissioner Ron, may I have clarification on your motion? I think you may have meant to mention a public hearing, meant to postpone to a time certain and hold a public hearing. I just wanted to clarify if that was your motion.
Yes, it is. Thank you for adding the important element of public hearing.
Commissioner Krishna, does that change your second?
It does not.
Okay, seeing no further comments, we'll call a vote.
Mr. Pawes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion passes. Thank you all for your patience through that process. Okay, we'll move next to the items. Well, actually, before we do that, Yeah, let's take a quick break. Continue along. Moving on to the items on the public hearing agenda, I'll read the procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meetings, and that is as follows. After the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules of procedure. Petitioners, including all of his or her representatives, will receive 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc. will receive 5 minutes. Individuals will receive 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution which is the commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. And it looks like the first two cases we have are related, and I understand we can combine them if we so choose. So if there's a motion from the commission, we can try to combine these. See, that's moved by Commissioner Krishna, seconded by Commissioner Strike. Any objection from the commission? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we'll say that motion is approved, so we'll combine the first two cases, which means that the time periods that I just read for public participation will be doubled. And I guess to start with, that's case 2022-0025 and 2022-0020. Can we receive a report, please?
Thank you, Chair Gardner. Your packet G1, I recommend that you turn to page 10 of the packet. I wanted to briefly walk you through some of the maps and photographs that I've included in the packet to sort of situate you with where this is in town. So on page 10 of your packet, there's a color-coded map. It's the land use plan map in Anchorage 2040 of the municipality, or of the Anchorage Bowl, I mean. And the petition site is circled. So you can see it's in West Anchorage on Northwood Drive off of Raspberry Road, just down from the Holiday gas station. If you turn to the next page, page 11, what this exhibit is showing is on the left-hand side is the existing land use plan map, and on the other side is the designations. And then on the right-hand side is the proposed, the applicant's proposed change in the land use designation. I apologize, this is in black and white. In my packet, it was color, and it didn't come through in color. But what I can describe to you is that the Anchorage 2040 land use designation, the colors on the map, are, this R3 multifamily color on the 2 parcels of land directly north of this petition site. So you'll see on the left-hand side under existing, is sort of a darker color of gray, and then it gets lighter for this petition site. But then when you go over to the proposed change by the applicant will now match the properties to the north. So that's the purpose of this, is just to say that the proposed change in the land use designation will be to match what's above it, okay? And then page 12, if you turn to the next page, this is a zoning map, and so I guess it's just to walk you through or describe what's in front of us. On one side of Northwood Street is it's all PLI land owned by the municipality. You see the petition site is zoned R1 currently, and it's in that checkered box. To the north of it is residential office, which is a commercial zoning, and it's developed with the residences at Northwood, which is a multifamily residential development. And then north of that is B1B, that's community serving commercial. And then above that is B1B also, and that's the gas station. South of the petition site is R2M, and there's apartment buildings south of this petition site. And then to the west is zoned R1, and there are single-family homes back there. And then on page 13, here's a picture of those residents at Northwood. This is the property adjoining the petition site directly to the north. So this is its neighbor to the north. The residence is Northwood, and that's that photograph that I think is helpful because you've probably seen these apartments. And then on page 14, the next page, it shows this is a picture from Northwood Street looking at the property directly to the south, and it's all apartment buildings along Barefoot Drive there. And then the page 15 is a picture of the petition site. It's all trees currently, so it's an undeveloped parcel of land sandwiched between those two apartment developments. And then page 16, that's the last one I just wanted to highlight. You can see a little bit of the residences at Northwood on that page 16. Okay, this is a request to change the Anchorage 2040 land use designation of one parcel of land containing 2.25 acres from compact mixed residential low to compact mixed residential medium. The abutting land use designation to the north is already compact mixed residential medium. The comprehensive plan amendment will allow the parcel to be rezoned from R1 to R3. In a separate case, it's being processed concurrently. If both the comprehensive plan amendment and the rezone are approved by the assembly, then Mr. Debenham will be able to build a multifamily housing development at this site. The 2012 West Anchorage District Plan designates the site as neighborhood commercial as background. But Anchorage 2040 is a newer plan, and it supersedes the older plan, which is the West Anchorage District Plan. Let's see. None of the municipal and state reviewing agencies object to the comprehensive plan amendment being proposed or requested here. Approval criteria A, the proposed amendment is necessary in order to address one or more of the following. It addresses double I, identification of new issues, needs, and opportunities that are not adequately addressed by the comprehensive plan. The standard is met. This is a new opportunity presented with this comprehensive plan amendment. The Anchorage 2040 land use plan map designates this tract as compact mixed residential low, yet the surrounding development to the north and south along Northwood Street are medium density apartments. This designation to the north is already a compact mixed residential medium, so the change would complement the tract to the north. Approval criteria B is met. A rezoning that deviates from the 2040 land use plan map may be appropriate if it demonstrates community-wide benefit or responds to new issues, needs, and opportunities not addressed in the comprehensive plan. And this is an opportunity site for new rental housing, which is necessary in our community. Approval criteria C, the standard is met. This amendment will not be detrimental to the public interest, health, safety, or convenience or welfare of the community. The site is sandwiched between multifamily residential developments on both the north and the south. Northwood Street is a Class 2 minor arterial, which is intended for 20,000 average daily vehicles. Such a street can certainly handle the new traffic generated from this multifamily housing development that's being that would be forthcoming. Approval criteria D, the standard is met. Anchorage 2040 Goal 4, neighborhood housing. Anchorage's neighborhoods should provide a range of places to live, meeting the housing needs of residents of all income levels and household sizes. And that's a well-documented, scarcity in our community. The comprehensive plan amendment also is supported by Anchorage 2020 Policy 7, avoiding incompatible uses adjoining one another, and West Anchorage District Plan Neighborhood Objective 2, ensuring that multifamily housing is appropriately located, well-designed, built, energy efficient, properly landscaped and maintained. It will make a positive long-term contribution to the community. The developer of this isn't an upzone in order speculative like sale or something like that. The new owner of the property, the proposed developer, he owns land to the north that he's already developed with multifamily housing. So he's a proven residential developer. Approval criteria E, the standard is met. The comprehensive plan amendment is consistent with the description and locational criteria for compact mixed residential medium. So when you read Anchorage 2040, it says, well, this is where this color designation should be. And it says it's a designation that provides multi-unit apartment and townhouse living. The location is areas with existing apartment housing, areas of transition between higher intensity uses and lower density neighborhoods, areas accessible to arterials without traveling through less intensive areas. Of course, Northwood Street is an arterial. Areas within walking distance of schools, and there's a school very nearby. So the department's recommending approval of this request for a comprehensive plan amendment to compact mixed residential medium, and draft assembly ordinance begins on page 7 and continues to page 9 of your packet. I'll quickly go into the rezone now, which is your packet G2. So the property is currently owned by the municipality of Anchorage and under the administrative control of the Heritage Land Bank, but should a comprehensive plan amendment and then a rezone be adopted by the Assembly, then ownership of the land would be transferred to Sean Debenham. None of the reviewing agencies object to this rezone. 127 public hearing notices were mailed on February 16th of this year. No public comments were received. The Sand Lake Community Council didn't comment. Of course, they were noticed, sent these applications, and a community meeting was held at the regular Sand Lake Community Council meeting on December 13th. A written summary of that meeting by the applicant is on page 33 of your packet. So in regards to the approval criteria for rezones, the approval criteria 1, the standard is met. The need for more housing units is a very real problem. Anchorage 2040 forecasts 21,000 new residential units are needed to meet the population growth through Anchorage through 2040. This site is the right place to increase residential capacity because it's next to an arterial, and it's two parcels and is 2 parcels south of a neighborhood center. That's the gas station I was referring to. The approval criteria 2, the standard is met. Comprehensive plan amendment application is being processed concurrently with this, and the implementing zoning district of that new designation is the R3 district. In terms of conformance with the comprehensive plan, this rezone to R3 is supported by Anchorage 2020 policies, Policy 4, Policy 5, Policy 7, Residential Policy 11, mixed density residential development shall be permitted in identified zoning districts. And then the applicable policies from Anchorage 2040 are Policy 1.2, employee land use and development strategies for the Anchorage Bowl to accommodate the forecasted number of additional residents, households, and jobs through 2040. Policy 4.1 provides sufficient land to meet the diverse housing needs of Anchorage citizens, where the integrity of the residential neighborhood area is protected from expanding commercial corridors or non-residential employment activities. Policy 4.3, promote balanced neighborhoods with diverse infill, goes on, talks about low-income housing. And then approval criteria 3, the standard is met. This is talking about what is the purpose of the R3 district. It's a multifamily residential district. It's intended for multifamily housing and townhouse style dwellings. It's characterized by low-rise, multi-story buildings. Approval criteria 4 is met. The R3 district is a multifamily residential district that allows townhouse and garden apartments, condominium developments. The petition site will continue to be compatible with the surrounding zoning and development intensities with this rezone, should it be approved. Approval criteria 5 is met. That's just talking about, is there sufficient roads and infrastructure like gas, electric, public water and sewer? Is it within the building, safety, police, fire, parks and rec service areas? It is. Approval criteria 6 is met. It's not likely to have adverse impacts on the natural environment. Approval criteria 7, standard is met. This standard speaks to, is there a need for any special limitations in order to make this rezone compatible with its neighbors? Is there any special stipulations that are needed? The department finds that there is no need for special limitations. Approval criteria 8 is met. It will not extend a land use pattern that is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. There are apartment buildings along Northwood Street and Barefoot Drive already. This rezone would allow more housing units to be built than the property would otherwise be allowed under an R1 zoning, which it is currently, or an R2 zoning district. And then approval criteria 9 is met. This will not create a split zoning. So the department finds that all 9 approval criteria met, is recommending approval. Attached is a draft assembly ordinance that's on page 8 of your packet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that presentation, Francis. If there's someone from the petitioner, feel free to give your presentation.
I guess I am on. We're good. My name's Sean Debenham from Debenham LLC. I'm a local real estate developer and property manager here. As Francis mentioned, we own the residences at Northwood, the apartment building that was recently completed in 2016, just north of the site. So we have an interest in the property. A few months ago, well, not a few months ago, over a year
Sorry
ago.
to interrupt, but if you're able to lift the mic up just a little bit, we've got the commissioner on the phone, and I think it's hard to carry through if it's not captured well. That's
I'll be
better, thank you.
closer too. About a year ago, HLB put the property on the market. We were the only ones to answer, to put a bid in on the property. It has significant problems on it. There's about 12 to 18 feet of peat and some wetlands on the site. On the north side, there's a 25-foot storm drain setback, and on the south, there's a 25-foot water setback, and so it's not a great, it's not a great site, but it worked for us. So we put in a bid on it. We're going to have to take the peat off, backfill it with some good dirt. It's going to be pretty expensive to do that. So as part of that, as a multifamily developer, we asked HLB to sell it to us as rezoned land of R3. R3 allows us to get to a density that would hopefully allow us to feasibly do a multi-development there. Currently, the R2M, which is what the current comp plan would allow, would only allow up to 15 dwelling units per acre, which would only be about 30 units, and we really need to be closer to 60 units before feasibility is really hit. The site obviously fits in well. It's right next door to our site. We're at 27 units per acre. You've seen a couple of pictures of the residences at Northwood. We're typically kind of a higher end multifamily developer, so it's fit well with the Sand Lake community. This is my fourth time I've done a rezone in this area that I've met and dealt with the Sand Lake Community Council. I have a very good reputation with them. I have a good working relationship with them. I think that's why you see that they're not here. They didn't put forward anything, any comments or anything, because they're very familiar with me and what I do. We had a very good conversation. The summary letter's there. I'm sure you've already read it, but we had very few comments about it and any concerns. There wasn't really any lingering or concerns that were, that would make it not a good thing to do. Development time frame would be hopefully between 2024, 2025 is when we're looking at development. We're trying to get the site filled as quickly as possible. We believe it'll be an excellent addition to the Sand Lake community, and it'll continue to kind of enhance that corner as you come into the Sand Lake community. We don't have a design yet for the project. It's contingent on the rezone and purchase of the land, and then we'll continue with the design, but we have done some preliminary feasibility, and we figure that we can put between about 25 to 30 dwelling units per acre on the parcel, even with the setbacks that are currently existing there. With that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or concerns that the commissioners might have.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Debenham, thank you for the history and quick walkthrough and explaining why this potentially works for your development concept. We've heard a number of cases around the affordability of housing in Anchorage, and as you've recently developed a property to the north, and it sounds like you're looking to replicate that concept, I'm curious, what has been your experience with that developed property? Is it meeting the market in terms of where the market is and well occupied? If you can speak to that, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So I'm a market rate multifamily developer. We don't do any subsidized housing. It's a different niche than what we do. We just don't, that's not something that we get into. Over the last 17 years, there's been less than 100 market rate apartment units built in Anchorage, and so feasibility is very, very difficult in the Anchorage Bowl. The residences at Northwood's doing great. It's occupied 99%. As a unit comes vacant, it is released pretty quickly. We've been able to sustain some nice market rents for it, but as you know, we're kind of going through a difficult time where costs are skyrocketing. So I hope, I'm optimistic that we'll be able to move forward and replicate this and do another successful development that's multifamily and would be market rate and would be an asset to Sand Lake. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but.
Commissioner Spinelli.
Just out of curiosity, are you planning to develop similar in height in scale to the stuff next door? Or will you need to go taller to get the density you're looking for?
So we just don't know quite yet. So we're going between townhomes versus more of a traditional apartment building similar to residences at Northwood. So if it was townhomes, it would be 3 stories with a garage on the bottom floor and living space on the second floor and bedrooms on the third floor. If it was more of a traditional apartment building, then it could potentially be a little taller because there would be a garage and then 3 levels above it of living space. So we haven't quite got there, but they're pretty, regardless of either concept, the top height of either is about 40 to 45 feet.
Okay, see no further questions pending at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Debenham.
Thanks.
I guess with that, we'll open it up to public comment. I don't know if anyone out there wishes to speak to this item. Okay, seeing no one, Mr. Debenham, you have an opportunity for rebuttal if there's any other comments you'd like to make.
I don't have any additional comments, but if there are questions or concerns, I'll just be right here, so not walking up and down the whole time.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And at this point, we'll just be looking for a motion. Commissioner Strike.
I'll go ahead and take a stab at this. Question to staff before I do: a single motion covering both A and B, or individual one moving into the second?
Through the chair, Mr. Strike, it would be the order of operations to make a motion for approval of the comprehensive plan amendment, and then after dealing with that, then deal with the second case.
Understood. In the case of 2022-0025, to recommend to the Anchorage Assembly approval of the Anchorage 2040 Land Use Plan Map Amendment to change the land use designation from compact mixed residential low to compact mixed residential medium.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Strike. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Eber. Commissioner Strike, feel free to speak to your motion if you have any comments.
I appreciate the developer, the moves that he's made forward. I think it was a very clear, concise plan that was been presented, and thank you for that.
Commissioner Eber, no obligation, but I'll give you an opportunity if you have any comments.
I have nothing further to say.
I'll make another.
Okay.
I'll also go on the record, there was no public comments. This was a public hearing. There were no public comments for or against, and that everything that's in our package is positive.
Commissioner Krishna.
Sure, I'll make some additional findings. I'll state that as per our packet, the approval criteria are met. In addition, the land to the north is also designated compact mixed residential medium, so this land would be abutting areas of similar character. And I'll second Commissioner Strike's finding that we did not hear any opposition from neighbors or the public. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one further in the queue, we'll go ahead and call the vote on this motion. Again, this is the motion to amend the land use plan map.
Mr. Polis?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion passes. And so still pending is case G2, which is the rezone request. And if you want to wait a second, you might have the proposed language available for your use. Commissioner Strike.
I'll take the second half. This is motion to approve in case 2022-0020 to recommend to the Anchorage Assembly approval of the rezone of a 2.25 acre tract from R1 Single Family Residential District to R3 Mixed Residential District.
The motion is seconded by Commissioner Spinelli. Commissioner Strike?
And similar to the previous findings, this was a public hearing. There has been no public testimony against this move. I find that the criteria for this move this change has been met. And that again, I'd like to thank the developer for putting a clear, compact, and concise plan here together for us.
Commissioner Spinelli, I'll give you a chance, but no obligation.
Sure, I intend to support the motion, and I'll just also find that Debenham is a known developer in the area. I feel like the neighbors probably saw this coming and knew what they were looking at. And he's also indicated that he might be looking at doing something that's less intensive than what he developed next door, which I'm sure they would probably be happy with. So, and the fact that nobody's here to oppose, I think we can support this.
Okay, seeing no one else in the queue, we'll go ahead and call a vote on this motion.
Mr. Polis?
Yes.
Thank you.
That motion passes as well. Next case is item number 2022-0021. Is there a presentation from staff?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request to amend the zoning map for approximately 4.6 acres of land from B1BSL, that's community business with special limitations, to B3SL, which would be general business with special limitations. A previous request to rezone the subject parcel to B3 was first before the Planning and Zoning Commission on April 9th, 2018, but was postponed until the May 14th, 2018 meeting. During that meeting, the case was postponed indefinitely. The public hearing was never opened and the commission did not discuss this case. The applicant had requested the postponement to allow them time to test the department's recommended special limitations to see if they could build the desired development within its constraints. To establish anticipated site aesthetics and ensure compatible design standards with the Anchorage 2040 land use plan, the applicant is proposing 4 special limitations, A, B, C, and D, included and shown on page 2 and 3 of the staff packet. And one important note is that an accompanying comprehensive plan amendment is not required to facilitate this rezone request due to the petition site's classification as town center within the Anchorage 2040 land use plan map, and that B3 is a compatible zoning district for this land use designation. The Planning Department has evaluated the application and presents the following findings for the Commission's consideration this evening. For rezone approval criteria 1, we do believe the criteria is met. This rezone is in the best interest of the citizens of Anchorage and will promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. The proposed special limitations within this new rezone request will reduce adverse impacts to the neighboring single-family residential district to the east and will also allow for administrative review of any development prior to construction. Additionally, building location and height will be further regulated to guide the development of this parcel to be consistent with the intent of the town center designation. Placing the building closer to the right-of-way will create a street-oriented design more friendly to pedestrian access. Town centers are intended to include a mix of retail, shopping, and services, public facilities, access to major roads and transit lines, and medium to high density residential uses. The rezone to B3SL would allow neighborhoods serving commercial and community uses as supported by the concept of the town centers identified in the Anchorage 2040 land use plan. The proposed special limitations will mitigate adverse impacts by limiting or prohibiting the expansion of more industrial type uses in the town center. The applicant has offered in their plating action to increase the required 10-foot landscape buffer to 15 feet, abutting the residential district to the east, and offset the existing 20-foot drainage easement for a total separation of 35 feet from the residential neighborhood to the east. For approval criteria 2, we do believe the criteria is met. The rezone request is considered compliant with the parcel's classification of town center within the land use plan. Additionally, the petition site is located at the intersection of two arterials, is near local shopping centers, parks, and schools. The site is also adequately served with properly sized public water and sewer services to accommodate the development of commercial and higher density residential uses. Additionally, this rezone is consistent with the following goals and policies of the following applicable comprehensive plans. And from Anchorage 2040 land use plan, that would be goal 1 and 2. And from the Anchorage 2020 Anchorage Bowl development plan would be policy 4, 7, and 49. For approval criteria 3, we do believe the criteria is met. This rezone is consistent with the purpose of the B3 zoning district and will allow uses that are more supportive of a town center. The B3 SL district would not restrict the possibility of using the parcel for residential dwelling units such as mixed-use development. The petition site borders West Diamond Boulevard, which sees over 20,000 daily vehicle trips and is also adjacent to the intersection of Jewel Lake Road, which is also classified as a Class 3 major arterial in the 2014 Official Streets and Highways Plan. Due to the subject parcel's proximity to a high-traffic intersection, it appears to be suitable for a community serving retail, mixed-use development, public services, and community uses, which would support the town center concept. Additionally, the rezone request does meet the locational criteria for the B3, and that would be district location requirements A and B of Title 21, Chapter 4, subsection 030D3. For approval criteria 4, we do believe the criteria is met. The rezone is compatible with surrounding zoning districts and existing developments surrounding the petition site through the proposed special limitations. The surrounding zoning districts include B3 and R1. The proposed B3 SL zoning allows for greater land use intensity, and there'd be allowed uses and building heights, as an example, than what is allowed within the adjoining R1 district. However, the proposed SLs will limit the height of buildings constructed near the adjoining R1 district, require placement of buildings within 90 feet of the public right-of-way, and will establish landscape screening requirements along the eastern property boundary that exceed code standards. Allowing for administrative review will provide the planning department an opportunity to evaluate the final design of the site to ensure compatibility with the comprehensive plan code standards and ensure compatibility with the adjacent R1 and B3 districts. For approval criteria 5, we do believe the criteria is met. Public water and sewer services are available to this parcel. The petition site is within the police and fire service areas, building safety service area, Anchorage roads and drainage service area, and the parks and recreation service area. Fixed route public transportation is currently available within a quarter mile of the site and currently on 60-minute headways. Increasing the land use intensity in this area is unlikely to stretch the capacities of existing municipal services beyond what they're built to currently. For approval criteria 6, we do believe that the criteria is met. The proposed rezone is unlikely to adversely impact the existing natural environment. The site has been cleared of nearly all vegetation and minimal natural conditions remain. Given the landscaping requirements of Anchorage Municipal Code, a new development constructed within the petition site would be required to install more vegetation than currently exists on site. This would result in a small enhancement to the function of the natural features within the district. In addition to landscaping requirements, the site may be required to construct driveways and parking facilities which meet the minimum requirements of Title 21 and Title 23 at the time a land use permit is applied for. Along with constructed vehicular facilities, the site will also be required to install all necessary utilities, including stormwater and drainage facilities. The site has direct access to West Diamond Boulevard, and as previously mentioned, West Diamond Boulevard is classified as a Class 3A major arterial, and that sees more than 20,000 average daily vehicle trips per day. And West Diamond Boulevard is a major east-west thoroughfare in Anchorage and is well-traveled. It is unlikely that the additional traffic generation to this site from the development of commercial use will increase the adverse impacts to the surrounding natural environment given the majority of site operations. While there may be noise originating from the site during any future development activity, site operations will not be permitted to exceed noise control standards within Anchorage Municipal Code Title 15, Chapter 70. For approval criteria 7, the criteria is met. When analyzing a rezone, the planning department can not only consider the planned use, but rather the shift from what is or is not allowed under the current zoning designation and what could be allowed under the proposed zoning. Given this methodology, the rezoning the petition site to B3SL would allow for a variety of commercial uses that would not otherwise be permitted under the existing B1BSL. Some examples would be a major entertainment facility, large vehicular rental facilities, and bars. However, the special limitations proposed for this B3 district require an administrative site plan review or higher level of review if required prior to the issuance of a land use permit for development. This will ensure that any adverse impacts to the surrounding properties would be evaluated by the planning department and may be mitigated to the best extent feasible. Additionally, L2 buffer landscaping would be required along the property frontages which abut the neighboring R1 zone lots to the east. This higher level of site screening and opportunity for administrative review will assist in mitigating the aesthetic and operational impacts of a commercial development on the surrounding neighborhood. For approval criteria 8, we do believe the criteria is met. This request will establish a new general business district within this area. The Anchorage 2040 land use plan identifies this area as town center within a transit supportive corridor, and rezoning from B1BSL to B3SL with the proposed special limitations will result in a development that is consistent with the intended aesthetic, operation, and feel of a town center. And lastly, for approval criteria 9, the criteria is met and the rezoning will not result in a split zone lot. And so given this evaluation, the department finds that the approval criteria for a zoning map amendment is met, and the department does recommend approval of the rezone with some amendments to the proposed special limitations. And we do not believe that these amendments will alter the intent of the proposed special limitations, but rather they will improve clarity and consistency with code terminology. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have on the request before them this evening. So thank you.
Commissioner Krishna.
Thank you. I'll start us off with a few questions. The first one is, are these the same special limitations that were proposed in 2018?
Through the chair, these special limitations differ. They've been dialed back quite a bit. So these were developed in conjunction with work between the planning department and the applicant.
Thank you. And my second question is, could you tell us a little bit about whether these sort of split height special limitations are things that the department has used in the past? And I guess I would just ask, I'm not opposed to them, but I'm wondering if you could speak to why lower height abutting the R1 district was chosen rather than a larger setback or some other means of buffer. Thank you.
Sure. Through the chair, this is the only case that I can recall of where we have specifically limited height through a special limitation. That doesn't mean to say that we haven't done it in the past. It's the only one that I can think of off the top of my head. Other than that, there are existing code provisions that limit height for neighborhood compatibility, transitions between neighborhoods of varying densities. And generally, the reason for that is to just limit or mitigate the amount of building bulk that could be next door to a lower density residential district, so that you don't have this massively imposing structure right next to, say, a single family home. As two kind of extreme examples of what could be done.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you through the chair, Mr. Yella. Has this gone to the plotting board?
Through the chair, it has, the corresponding plat has gone through the plating board. The status of that, I believe the applicant could probably speak to more in depth.
I'll follow up then. Thank you.
Commissioner Spinelli.
Regarding condition C, the landscaping and the fence, am I understanding this right, that there's going to be the backyards of the neighboring residential land, then 10 feet of landscaping, and then a fence? Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. And it's a similar design standard when you have required landscaping in commercial districts, that the landscaping be installed exterior of any fence.
I guess I'm just curious, is somebody meant to maintain that landscaping? It just seems kind of funny to have landscaping trapped in between two fences. And
through the chair, I see the issue there. But certainly all the landscaping that would be installed on this property, it would be the property's owner's responsibility to maintain it. But yes, certainly I can see if the abutting single-family home lot has a 6-foot fence in their backyard, and then you have, X amount of feet of landscaping with another fence, that could pose some issues for survivability of landscaping within there.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a few quick questions about the height limitation as well? I guess my first question is just to confirm, is the 45-foot limitation, is that what the height limitation would be under this proposed rezone, or is it 60 feet since it's a town center? Without the limitation in place?
So through the chair, without the limitation in place, I apologize, I don't have code in front of me right now, but under the B3 zoning district, I believe it's 45 feet by right with, and there are some exemptions to get additional height there. So what this special limitation would do is it would essentially erase the possibility of those height exemptions, and it would just set a maximum height of 45 feet.
Okay, so I think that answers my next question then too, which is if, not just maybe the exemptions, but some of the carve-outs from the height, like the appurtenances that could be on the roof, is the understanding that it's a 45-foot, that's the cap of anything? Or are some of those components, like the appurtenances, would that be interpreted to kind of be incorporated into this limitation?
So through the chair, under Chapter 6, like the rules for measuring height, appurtenances and elevator penthouses, those are exempt from the overall height measurement. So, certainly like if there's HVAC equipment on the top of a building, we wouldn't punish the building owner because they have HVAC equipment on the top of the building. We wouldn't count that towards the height, but those exemptions for standard building equipment, elevator penthouses, things like that would still apply. Okay, so then I guess just to make sure I understand, what are if it is 45 feet, that would be the requirement in this rezone, and maybe we could confirm if that's the case, but if it is 45 feet, would there be a difference on the west side of this property in terms of how that limitation applies versus not? So through the chair, it would be 45 feet high on the west half of the property, and then on the east half, it'd be limited to 30 feet unless the development includes one story of residential. So if you had a mixed-use development on the east half, you could go up to 45 feet. But otherwise, if it's strictly commercial on the east half, then it would be 30 feet. 45 feet high on the western half.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if it is 45 feet, that would, absent the limitation, would be the height. If we need to even mention 45 feet, if that changes anything or just adds potential confusion, as opposed to a limitation that just focuses on the potential for 30 feet on the east half. But I'm not sure if it's 60 feet or 45 feet, if the fact that it's a town center changes that or not. So maybe you could confirm that.
Through the chair, so the height limitation as written in the special limitation would prevail if you were to compare it to the town center or, the general B3 district standards. So they would be limited to 45 feet. And in terms of just going across the board and doing 45 feet rather than the 30 feet, and then if you do one floor or one story of residential, that you can go up to 45. I think that was if you had a residential use or residential character on the eastern portion, it was considered more compatible than having straight 45-foot structure next to the R1 residential on the eastern half.
Okay, thanks. I'll leave it at that. Seeing no one else in the queue, I guess if the petitioner has a presentation, we're happy to hear it.
Good evening. My name is Laquita Chmielowski. I am with Dow Engineers, and I'm here tonight representing the petitioner. So a little bit about where the project's located. I think you're all fairly familiar, but it's located just to the east of Jewel Lake and Diamond Boulevard. Right now it's 3 separate parcels. As staff mentioned, we are going through a replat process, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. It's approximately 4.6 acres and currently zoned B1B with special limitations. It is B3 zoning to the north, west, and south, and then the R1 zonings to the east. So a little bit of history on the rezone of this property. So originally, when this area was zoned, this property was B3. In 1985, it was rezoned to B3 special limitations. This was prior to the adoption of any land use or district plans. The special limitations prohibited some of the uses, had some height limitations, buffers for the east. And you're going to kind of see a theme that we keep carrying through with these rezone requests. Then it was rezoned again in 2006 to its current zoning. And at that same time, it was subdivided into 2 properties, or 2 lots. Again, had similar prohibitions on some of the uses, some height limitations, as well as limiting the hours of operation for commercial uses. So, as staff mentioned, we started this process back in 2018. At that time, we went to the Community Council, talked to them about the rezone in December of 2017. We went back in December of 2021 to give them an update on this project and that it was moving forward. We didn't necessarily hear any objections from the community as far as the rezone was concerned. Certainly there were some questions about access to the site and circulation, that sort of stuff related to any planned development. And again, we're requesting to rezone this from B1B special limitations to B3 special limitations. So as staff touched on, all the area plans really support rezoning this particular property to B3, and then we're going a step further to add those special limitations. And then this is just a graphic kind of showing you, so on the let's see, I guess it would be your left-hand side of the screen, is how it's currently zoned. So you can see the B3 is the light blue that surrounds the property, and then the R1 to the east. And then we're just asking to rezone it to B3 with special limitations. So you can see it's very consistent with the surrounding zoning. So a little bit about the special limitations. We're really trying to carry forward some of the special limitations that have been brought forth in the past, as well as making sure that this is more of a town center. And so, of course, that primary entrance needs to be within 90 feet of the right-of-way that pushes the building closer to the street. An administrative site plan review is required for any development prior to getting building permits issued. So that's just another level of protection, especially for those residents to the east. And then we talked about the building height limitations, and I guess just to add on to what staff mentioned, this building height limitation is very similar to what was in previous special limitations. and really to allow that development to be a little bit higher when you're closer to the commercial, which is, it's more compatible with, and then having a lower height limitation when you're on the other side of on the east side adjacent to the residential. And then of course the buffer landscaping with the ornamental side obscuring fence that is consistent with what you see on like self-storage facilities. And then a little bit about the platting. So back in 2018, we submitted a preliminary plat to subdivide the property into one lot and one tract, and it was approved at that time. The project went on hold. That approval was good for 24 months and it expired in 2020. And so we started the preliminary plat process again, and we received approval from the platting board approximately 2 weeks ago. For the same preliminary plat that we had back in 2018 for the one lot and one tract. So we'll be, once we get the resolution from that decision, we'll be moving forward with our final plat. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Strike.
Thank you, and through the chair. Thank you for that presentation. In regards to the special limitations, are there any special limitations out there that are a concern to you and your client?
No, we're in agreement with the special limitations that are in the staff packet.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I don't see anything pending at the moment. Thank you. You've got 5 minutes for rebuttal when the time comes, which might be soon, so feel free to stay close. Okay, we'll go ahead and officially open this for public comment. I'll see if anyone would like to testify to this matter. Okay, seeing no one, you've got your 5 minutes for rebuttal if there's anything additional you'd like to add.
I don't have anything additional, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and close this public hearing. And, oh, I see Mr. Yell in the queue.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify something for the commissioners. So on this recommendation on page 10 of the staff packet, the text that is capitalized and within brackets is being proposed to be removed, and the text that is underlined and in the appropriate case would be added. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. Commissioner Strike. Motion from Commissioner Strike. Can you turn your, yep.
In the matter of case 2022-0021 to approve a zoning map amendment to rezone approximately 4.6 acres of land from B-1B special limitations, community business with special limitations, to B3SL general business with special limitations, subject to the department's amendments shown on page 10 of the staff report. Can I make an addition? With the additional caveat that, as per mentioned by staff, the department recommendations that are capitalized in section 9 on the department recommendations are to be removed, and that those areas that are underlined are to be added.
So I guess just to confirm, just for clarity's sake, Commissioner Strike, I think your motion, as I understand it, is to approve with all the special limitations as presented on page 10, recognizing that the items that are underlined are included and the items that are in capitals and in brackets will be ultimately deleted.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Commissioner Strike, if you'd like to speak to your motion.
Yes, thank you. Again, another well-placed, well-put-together packet for us to review. I do note that there was no, as a public testimony, there was no public testimony against this project, that this has been progressing fairly for some time. It will be a great addition to the area, finally getting this area developed. It's been an empty lot now for some time. and that all the criteria here have been met, and the applicant is in concurrence with all the special limitations that have been identified and placed on the property.
Okay, seeing no one else in the queue, we'll go ahead and call a vote.
Mr. Polis?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion passes. The next and final item on the agenda is case 2022-0010.
Mr. Chair, do you have a preference? If I have a presentation, you all have seen it before, I could stand up there or sit over there, whatever your preference is.
I think whatever's kind of most convenient for you is fine.
Okay.
To be able to access the presentation.
Yeah, I'll sit here then.
Okay.
May I? Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Daniel McKenna Foster. I'm a long-range planner. Coming tonight with some information about the RFA, the Reinvestment Focus Area Text Amendment. We looked at this about a month ago. We've gotten some comments back and tried to incorporate those, also some of the comments that you included. Thank you for those. There were, I guess I'll just go through quickly and to kind of refresh our memories what the RFA is and what we're looking at here. So the RFA is an ordinance that it's creating a framework for allowing sort of public-private partnerships, especially when it comes to utilities, infrastructure, investments, tax abatements, that sort of thing. So this ordinance is not creating or designating any specific RFAs right now. So what might an RFA include? It's pretty broad, and this is some of the commentary we got. Why is it so broad? A lot of that because we don't want to tie anybody's hands in the future and allow for these opportunities to come up as they come up and hopefully allow for that flexibility. So could be targeted rezonings, tax abatement, transportation improvement, alley improvement, utility undergrounding, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these bigger sort of interdepartmental projects that might take different types of funding that you couldn't really do through a normal variance or even a small area plan improvement, small area improvement plan process. So in thinking about where these RFAs should go, we're relying on the plan, and the plan identifies some certain areas where they would be most important. We talked about this last time, so I won't go through it too much, but basically it was looking at places in the municipality where there's already concerted investment or planned investment, so it would make the most sense to really encourage the kind of development the community is looking for in those areas. Here are the areas identified in the 2040 land use plan, highlighted a little bit. These were the areas specifically noted, although the ordinance as written allows for a bit more flexibility than that. We talked a little bit about how there's this existing process called the Small Area Implementation Plan, which is really more of a site-specific zoning plan, and the RFA, which is the Reinvestment Focus Area, which is sort of a larger, more working in context with many partners type of planning tool. I won't go too much into that. One comment that the Commission provided last time was to try and reduce kind of similarities or overlaps between the two. We did look through that. There wasn't a lot that we could do because a lot of them, they look so similar in format, but they really address different things. So changes since the work session, add language about working between agencies and departments. There was a comment about the need to take advantage of federal stimulus or state stimulus or any sort of funding, and so we put that in there. I think the language we had is about making sure that coordinate local investments with state or federal level programs or investments if applicable. Another thing was attempt to streamline the small area implementation plan and RFA, and we sort of cut some fat off where we could. Incorporate comments from public feedback, and I'll go through those in a little bit, and organizational edits, just some things where, one was number 6 and it made more sense as number 7. So in terms of what we heard from the public, we got some great comments. There was some concern about how the ordinance seemed to be talking about what may be available rather than what is available. That, again, is really more about trying to leave things open-ended, so if an opportunity comes up, the municipality is able to respond to that and say, yes, we could do that type of tax abatement that wasn't explicitly laid out in this ordinance, so because we don't really know what might come up or what kind of financial pressures might arise or financial opportunities might arise. Another question was, what about criteria? Can we put more criteria in here? We crafted this ordinance so that the criteria really gets set by the Assembly or the Planning and Zoning Commission, but sort of by the policymakers, because if in a public-private partnership, it's really going to be about somebody looking out for the public interest and then making sure it meets all the standards. And so we thought that's something that will be decided by the policymakers, just because we don't know what might come along. Specific projects, that was a comment, multiple comments people said, well, are there any projects in mind? Since we last met, we've been doing a lot of work with the downtown plan, the Our Downtown update. One area we've potentially identified is right here. It's kind of the Our Better Blocks area of downtown. And this is an area where our department is thinking about potentially proposing a reinvestment focus area to kind of start things off. Having the municipality do it might also be a great way to work out some of the kinks and then hopefully make it a more efficient tool, so moving forward. So some questions about how the plan located these areas. There was a comment from Mr. Debenham related to that project. He was really interested in this, and we're sympathetic to the need for more development, more housing, and we explained that a lot of the RFA, where it's eligible, is really defined by the plan. So we tried to add some flexibility there, but we can't change what the plan says about what's eligible or not. So it's kind of not a neighborhood center, but maybe the mixed-use center, the transit-oriented development areas. So that was one comment where we thought it would make sense, but we can't change the future land use map. So we did change a little bit of the language to say that an RFA needs to be generally in conformance with the plan rather than specifically in conformance, to add a little bit of flexibility there. And there was another comment about size, about reducing the base size, the requirement from 5 acres to 1. We explained that the purpose of this is if it is a public-private partnership and we're dealing with public facilities, public investments. Ideally, it should start at a scale that makes economic sense, rather than creating a big process that only really addresses 1 acre of land where you might not get that much development out of it. The starting point is 5 acres, but there are still other ways within the code to get below that. So there is some flexibility there. Just you couldn't do a straight-up proposal for 2 acres for an RFA without going through a special process. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I guess I have just one really specific question. I'm looking on, I guess, page 15 of the packet and some of the proposed language here in the draft ordinance. And there was a section that I didn't understand it. I'm not sure if maybe there's a typo or I'm just not understanding it. And that's lines, what would this be, like 10 through 13 in D2. It mentions the items that need to be submitted as part of the proposal, and it says these items shall serve as an existing condition summary and may be waived or adjusted under the approval of a small area implementation plan requirements in section 2103 115D. I think that section identifies the requirements for the SAPE, and I guess I'm not clear on exactly what that's saying.
I think maybe that it should say under the approval.
I guess is it that a SAPE might itself, if you're doing it concurrently with an RFA, might maybe allow for waiving some of those, or is it suggesting that you look at the requirements in the SAPE to see if some of these might be waived?
So there is a good amount of overlap between the way the applications look. So I think the intent and what's required, the SAPE requires a lot more stuff about existing conditions, traffic conditions, and that sort of thing. So I think that might have been the intent, but in thinking about how this could be a bit clearer, these items. I think the intent was that if somebody has already gone through the small area implementation plan, rather than having them submit another application that looks in many ways like that, some of these requirements, some of the existing conditions summary could be waived. But if it's unclear, I wonder if there's a way we could make that clearer.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it doesn't make much sense. I mean, I'm wondering would it correctly capture the intent if it says something like, these items shall serve as an existing condition summary and may be waived or adjusted, I guess, if included in an improved small area implementation plan? Is that maybe what it's saying, or is it maybe, I don't know if that accurately captures what you're looking for there.
Yeah, I think this was assuming that if a small area implementation plan went first, that if they said, okay, I'd like to actually do an RFA now, that piece could be waived. So maybe, yeah, if it said maybe waived or adjusted with the approval or following the approval of a small area implementation plan, of the small area implementation plan requirements in section 2103, 115D.
Okay, well, I guess I'll leave that for the moment. I've just got Commissioner Krishna in the queue.
Thank you. My struggle with this is largely, I think, some things that you have already identified about the assembly level decisions that will need to be made about the financing tools that will be available to property owners. I think it's hard to see right now what an application might look like. I am guessing there isn't an application form available for our review or anything like that. I think, maybe I would just point out that, earlier at our public hearing, we saw, this move towards by right, parking reductions or other opportunities for developers that streamline and clarify the process to access resources to make development easier in our city. And I would defer to the rest of the commission, but it is a little bit hard for me to see right now whether this would be worth a developer's time to apply given the huge uncertainty in what might, if anything, be available to them through a process. I know that's a bigger picture question. I think maybe I'll pause and let other commissioners speak, and thank you.
Apologies, Commissioner Eber, if you've been in there for a while. Go ahead.
Has there been any, developments where the city has worked with private developers to revitalize certain areas in Anchorage as of yet? I mean, I think, and this is just my own recollection, that maybe something in Mountain View had been done. I could be wrong, it was a long time ago, but did you have any insight into that?
If I may, through the chair. So I'm fairly new, so I don't have the greatest historical knowledge of what's traditionally been done, and the way I'd answer that question is that the city, there's the planning department, then there's the real estate department, and some of our other partners that are sort of city affiliates or maybe city type. So in terms of actual developments where we've been putting public funds into a project, the planning department hasn't done any of that, although I have been party to conversations about using existing sites that the municipality might own and thinking about how to turn those into better use or higher and productive use. But in terms of an actual development where there was city-side investment in it, I can't speak to that. Although this would kind of be heading that way, so the city would be, in a way, making an investment through a tax abatement or something else in a project, as long as it met all these other criteria. But unfortunately, in my short time here, I haven't seen anything specific, so I can't speak directly about that.
Thank you.
So I guess another, just kind of question about the process from here. So just to kind of confirm where we are. So at the moment, the planning department is looking for a recommendation from us to approve this that would go forward to the assembly, and it looks like you're including recommended findings with respect to the proposed ordinance to pass along. Is that correct?
Yes.
Commissioner Krishna.
Thank you. To the text, I guess I have a couple of specific points that may be useful. The first is mostly looking at page 15 of our packet here under D1. I see it says petitions signed by property owners. I think it might be useful to clarify all property owners. I think this is maybe a question. I think I was now I'm looking at page 17, item E3, and I guess I'm wondering, when we talk about maximizing development of additional housing units, I'm wondering if it's conceivable that an RFA might be approved that might be an all-commercial property, or if infill housing development is really kind of a core criteria of what an RFA needs to look like. Thank you.
So we've got, I guess, a couple of options. We could move this forward with a recommendation, or I suppose there's also an option if there are further questions that the commission has that they're interested in having further reviewed. I think, although correct me if I'm wrong, there's an opportunity to kind of go back before it comes before us again.
I think whatever you see fit is, I don't think there's any pressure either way. There's no, impending project or anything. This is sort of a tool if it's useful, and if it's not, it's not. But I think whatever the commission decides.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question based on your last commentary, and apologies if I missed the linked conversations on this topic already. If we act now, and let's say the commission elects to approve, would it be coming back before us for a future approval absent a project, or is this our only bite at the apple per se for crafting what we deem to be the appropriate language within the AO before it goes to the assembly?
If I may, through the chair. Yeah, this, according to the way it's structured, if you went through and passed the motion, it would go to the assembly, and then it would be adopted, and the next time you would see it would be with a concrete project.
Commissioner Strike.
Thank you, and through the chair. In the cover sheet to the memorandum from the planning department. I guess I'm going to try to see if I can let some of the air out of the tires here. Maybe I'm going to try to oversimplify this. But the request, as it's noted in the very first paragraph, the Municipality of Anchorage Planning Department is requesting recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding the creation of a new reinvestment focus area procedure in Chapter 13 of Title 21. And if we get to the bare bone basic, I applaud the program. Great recommendations. I think this is a fantastic approach. I think there's, if we look at the comments that you've provided us, especially those from Cook Inlet Housing, they have some concerns with how it might be implemented. And it's a matter of getting the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail and so forth. But how do we, I think everyone agrees this is a great move forward, but the method by which it might be implemented, funded, digested, and so forth, because there are going to be a lot of agencies, groups out there that are going to become experts on manipulating this process for their own benefit. And don't begrudge them. Cook Inlet Housing is a great, great program. But they will understand and know this program, and if there's money available or benefits available, they're going to seek them out. You need to be prepared for that. And then any program that you have that gets rolled out that just sits on the shelf, I don't think you want to be attached to that type of program. I think you want to be attached to a program that has strength and viability to it with funding and an intent and purpose. I'm going to get off that high horse here for a moment. And as I'm going through this, and when I read it the first time, I'm thinking of sources of funding. And the source of funding that comes to my mind, I don't think it's intuitive that it could be used, but was possibly some of the monies from the CARES Act and how those funds might be used to develop and incentivize development and so forth in the community. Now, I understand there were stipulations of how soon that had to be spent, et cetera, et cetera. But again, those are things that have been impacted through COVID, which Cook Inlet Housing recommends or has identified as well. But I don't think you're going to hear much argument from this group, at least from me. I think this is a positive, move forward. It's a reinvestment focus area. I think that you might be limiting yourself to that 5 acres, might be too small, or else you have some ways to combine and structure them. But as far as what we're supposed to do here tonight, do we give you those recommendations, or do we make a formal, I'm trying to take this at its face. So I'll back off now.
So my understanding, and I'd be happy to hear anyone else's comments, Commissioner Strike, but I think, we're perfectly within our rights to provide recommendations, but ultimately it would be moving it forward for approval to the Assembly, and we can include findings and recommendations as part of that. I've got Commissioner Spinelli in the queue.
Yeah, just be harsh. Try and clear this up. My whole thing with the RFA, I don't see it as a very useful thing for very many developers. I don't think there's going to be tons of people trying to use this thing. This was something that has been talked about over the years, and for entities like Cook Inlet Housing, where they're trying to develop along Chugach Way, and the city says, you need to fix this entire crappy road. And they say, no, that's your road. You should fix that because we're going to build these fancy, nice buildings along the side of it. And there's no tool. The city has no way to do things like that. There's no way the city can just say, okay, yeah, we're throwing $1 million. Here's our money. Go fix that road. So that's what this is, and that's what this is supposed to be. That's what it's been talked about. That's why it's in the 2040 plan. We did have a work session on this where that's where we were supposed to provide our feedback, and then he would change it, and that's why it's here before us tonight. I haven't given much feedback to it because I didn't think it, I thought that the Cook Inlet Housings of the world were the people that were going to utilize this, and they should be kind of bird dogging to make sure it works for them. And that was kind of my approach on it. And so if the commission wants to start working on it, I feel like we would need to have a work session with the stakeholders. But that's my 2 cents. Other than that, I'm ready to move this thing.
That is within your power, Commissioner Spinelli. You have that ability. Oh, sorry, that's on me. Before we do that, we'll go ahead and open this for public testimony formally. Seeing no one here ready to testify, we'll go ahead and, before we close it, yeah, Mr. McKenna Foster, you feel free to provide any rebuttal.
Thank you, and thank you for all your comments. I just wanted to note that the Cook Inlet's comments are on page 27 of 45 of the packet. And they had some great comments speaking specifically to a project, what might have happened in this case. And our response was, well, we don't really know. It would have had to be the kind of thing where this is sort of like a big high-level development agreement. It's the kind of thing that would have taken place before, and at the higher level, they would have gotten, right-of-way and the water utility, and all these people together and saying, okay, how can we make this work? Here's the proposal. Can we make it work? Is there something we can do here in this specific area and maybe put in some sort of investment or remove a tax or something? So that, you'll see the responses there in blue, but Cook Inlet did provide comments, so I just wanted to direct anybody to see in their own words what they said on page 27. Thank you.
Commissioner Strike.
Yep, thank you, and again, through the chair. Yeah, and I saw that what Cook Inlet used as an example, and when I was reading that, another one that came to mind, and I think Commissioner Spinelli may have been on the commission at the time, there was a piece of property in downtown off Cordova, and it was a tear down, going to build up a new, more higher density, but it backed up to an alley, and it required that the alley be paved. But only the pavement was behind that one particular area. Yet no other part of the alley was going to be paved, just the part behind this lot. Now, is that the type, granted this was less than 5 acres, but is that the type of other types of improvements that Cook Inlet Housing is also referring to? The type of additional reinvestment or additional investment a developer would have to go through?
If I may, through the chair. Presumably, I wonder if that might be the kind of situation where the developer says, hey, I'd like to do this project here, but I don't want to have to do the entire alley. So there needs to be a means for somehow to provide the funding or raise some sort of revenue to develop that entire alley and improve it to those standards. The RFA theoretically could be a way to do that, and in doing that, it's bringing all of those property owners together to address this issue that deals with common right-of-way. The small area implementation plan, for example, that's really more probably on one site, and that's about the zoning on one site. But with your example, we're talking about public right-of-way that touches on maybe 10 property owners. So presumably, yes. And the way that we would kind of envision that is the property owner would come to the municipality and say, hey, I'm interested in this project. I've gotten my neighbors together. We've talked it out. We have all the signatures. Now we'd like to figure out how can we work with the municipality to get this improved to standard so everybody benefits. What can we do? Can we get a tax abatement? Can we get a deferred something? I don't know. So potentially that could be. But again, I'm sort of deflecting, say, I don't know. It would depend on the specific conditions.
Well, and I think what you're doing is that you're actually raising some of the very questions that Cook Inlet did. And that was, again, we have a unfunded program. I don't think there's going to be a checkbook available here right away. It's not funded, a program. And then I think one of their arguments is, if it's funded, are developers going to be competing for those resources? And if they're competing for those resources, what's their criteria as to which programs have a higher priority over another? And I think that is probably, knowing the folks at Cook Inlet, that's probably what they're zeroing in on, because they will, again, structure any proposal they do to meet that criteria explicitly so that they check all the boxes, because it's quite an investment in time and effort to put together a proposal like that, even to the municipality. So I think that's one of the concerns before implementing a program that, and I'm taking a characterization or taking words out of the last paragraph. This is the time to address that type of criteria to ensure that this program gets started correctly, or at all. Thank you.
I've got Commissioner Spinelli in the queue. I guess before we move on, just so I don't forget and get in trouble further down, we didn't hear any testimony. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And Commissioner Spinelli.
Before we start making motions and we're just kind of rattling off, I guess I was going to respond to Commissioner Strike's question. The alley development that you're referring to is much too small. I think the cost of that alley was less than what I would imagine this process cost. This is for something that comes to mind that would be more similar or on the scale of this was Widener redeveloped a whole lot of trailer units out in East Anchorage. And what he was looking at, or what they were looking at, was a redevelopment and multifamily project on the site. And what the municipality was asking them for, or telling them, was saying, Newell Street is, you know, a collector on our plan, and we want you to extend this thing out to Boundary Avenue. And Widener came back and said, you want me to build you like $2 million worth of road? And the city said, yeah, well, we really want this collector, even though it's not a road today, or it's a driveway into a trailer park. So what they did instead was just redevelop. They just got rid of the old trailers and brought brand new ones in. And it's a weird looking place, but this is to allow the municipality to have a tool to say, you know what, we'll do some of our share of that off-site improvement that we're going to require, code will require, and the commissions and planning board and whoever else sees it is going to require you to build that road. This is just providing the municipality a tool that they could use at their discretion. And the whole thing goes through assembly approval, so there's going to be so much scrutiny, you're going to have a ton of people on board, which is kind of why I'm like, let's put the tool in the toolbox and see if it works. And they'll tweak it. I mean, to make an amendment to this code, if need be, when the time comes, it will be easier than, because if we don't have it, they'll never find out if it works. That's my 2 cents.
Commissioner Krishna.
Last comment, from me at least. I just also want to note that we do have another tool in our toolbox potentially, which is a joint work session with the assembly, if that's an appropriate part of the process. I understand that's been done before for some planning and zoning cases. But I am happy to cede the floor and make a motion if that's the direction we want to go in.
I think either direction in which we go will need some sort of motion presented before us. So, and look, there's one on the board there. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fellow Commissioners, in case 2022-0010, I move to recommend to the Anchorage Assembly approval of the creation of a new reinvestment focus area procedure in Chapter 3 of Title 21.
Thank you, Commissioner Ron. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Winchester. Commissioner Ron, would you like to speak to your motion?
Briefly, if I may. Fellow Commissioners, I appreciate all the discussion. To staff, thank you for responding and being a part of that conversation as appropriate. I felt like the boat was getting a little tippy there for a while, but I think we've righted ourselves, and it seems like we're moving in a certain direction. At least for me, it's towards approval. I'd like to commend staff for building this tool promptly, for first coming to PZC with a work session, to engaging stakeholders to help shape and craft it, and then promptly coming back to the commission with a draft ordinance for our review and discussion and movement. So in line with my motion, according to recommended findings on page 3 of the staff packet, that's findings 1 through 5, again, I move to approve.
I would just like to say Commissioner Ron did his usual thorough job there, so I have nothing further to add, but good job, Commissioner.
Okay, I don't see anyone else. We had a lot of wind up for a small little conclusion here, but with nothing further pending, we'll go ahead and call the vote.
Mr. Pulis?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion passes. Thank you all. It's the last item on our agenda. I think we're just looking for, did I miss something? Okay, motion to adjourn by Commissioner Eber, seconded by Commissioner Strike. I see no objection. That is approved.